Hi guys, how you doing? In this video I am quite clearly and quite obviously leaping on a bandwagon. And that bandwagon is Ronda Rousey versus Floyd Mayweather. And I thought it would be interesting to give you my thoughts on that, to have a bit of a think about what would happen if the two of them were to fight. Now, I'll make this clear from the very start. I have no expectation in any way that a fight between the two of them would ever happen. I don't think that Mayweather would ever accept it because he's got everything to lose, whereas Rousey doesn't really have that much to lose. Even if she loses the fight, nobody would think much less of her because Mayweather is such a successful boxer. Whereas if he lost, it would destroy his reputation full stop. He got beaten by a pretty little blonde girl who is a lot smaller than him. But let's just think about that for a moment. If the two of them were to fight, who would win? And to be perfectly honest with you, my money would all be on Rowdy. I think she's fantastic. And not just because she's kind of hot, but because she's got such a rounded skill set. And a lot of people say to me, oh, she's a terrible striker. And I don't buy that for a second. Oh, she eats punches left, right, and centre. No, she doesn't. What she does is she doesn't necessarily deal with punches because she's not playing a striker's game. She's playing a well-rounded game, and she's looking for opportunities to grapple. So she's not using her hands to defend herself, she's using her hands to try and set up a clinch or a throw, because that's where she excels the most. However, saying that, in her recent fight with Betchkahea, clearly the girl can strike. You go back and watch Kahea against Shayna Baszler, and you tell me that Kahea is not a skilled striker. Yes, she is. She's strong, she's powerful, she can hit hard and well and effectively. Yet she was completely negated by Rousey. And that was because Rousey was striking, not because at any moment she could have gone in, she could have clinched, she could have thrown her. And I think that her game was quite simply to try and humiliate Kahea to a degree by beating her at her own game, in much the same way that John Jones used to do. It wasn't quite enough to beat somebody, he needed to beat them on their own terms. And I think that's something that Rousey has that people underestimate massively. So I don't think that were the two of them to fight, that Mayweather would necessarily knock her out very quickly. And I think that for two reasons. Firstly, because a lot of people talk big about Rousey, and when it actually comes to the crunch, can't deliver. I think she's much better than people give her credit for. I think her movement is good, and her reading of the fight is very, very skilled. And I think that, and it's a judgment based on what I think of the personality of Mayweather, but I don't think he'd want to walk into the ring and knock her out and walk out. I don't think that's what he'd want to do. I think he would have to conclusively beat her and draw it out and humiliate her and show he was superior. And I think that's why he would lose. I don't think he'd be going for that knockout shot straight away. He'd want to knock her around a bit first. She's not said very nice things about him. And to be honest, it's hard to disagree. And I think what would happen is that he'd try and hit her a few times. And she'd be more evasive than he was expecting, and it would make him a little bit cross. And he'd put in a big blow. And I think the second he did, she'd step in, she'd dump him on the floor. And the way she controls her own body when she's fighting, and you see this a lot in judo, is that when somebody throws someone else, they're trying very hard not to land on the floor. They don't want their back to land on the floor, they want their opponent's back to land on the floor. And Rousey's kind of modified this slightly, in that instead of not landing on the floor, she's very focused in landing on top of her opponent. And that way they're being hit from both sides. They're hitting the floor pretty hard, but they've also got somebody else's weight on top of them. And when she gets it right, she's landing with a point of her shoulder directly on the ribs. And it's just that, it gives her that second. As you hit the floor, there's a flash, you don't quite know what's happening, you're not entirely sure where you are, and that's the moment in which she excels. And I think, to be perfectly honest, she'd dump him on the floor, she'd land on top of him, and before he'd realised quite what was going on, she'd have him in an armbar. And in all honesty, she'd probably put it on slightly harder than she should. And I think she'd win the fight. I don't think he'd tap out. I think he's a little bit too arrogant to accept. And I think that it would probably be a moment, much like some of Rousey's earlier fights, where she put it on so hard that there was no denying it was on, and it would be stopped at that point by the ref. And I do honestly believe she would win. Now, I could be wrong. Maybe Mayweather would go in a sensible way and he would do his absolute utmost to fight a controlled and safe game and just try and knock her out quickly. But it's never going to happen. Never going to happen. She's good enough to get inside. You look at Mayweather and Pacquiao and see how many times they came to clinch. You clinch against Rousey, you've lost. Simple as that. So effectively, what she's doing at that point is she's saying, if you fight me the way you fight everybody else, you've lost. So that's what I think. I think Rousey would beat him relatively quickly and very conclusively. If it ever happens, then if I'm right, brilliant. If I'm not, I'll be very surprised. But it's not going to happen. But it's a nice thing to talk about. Anyway, let me know what you think. Would Rousey win? Would Mayweather win? And I'll see you around soon. Take care, guys.